Yep.
Good morning, Excellence family. It is Title Tuesday, and I am here with our title attorney, Paul Sardone. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Kristina.
How's your week going?
So far, so good. Happy to be here. Talk about some title issues.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Now, we always like to catch up with you because this week we are going to talk about restrictions on properties as it relates to associations. Many clients will buy into a community, an association, whether it's a condo or a home, townhome, and I don't know that they're 100% sure of what they're buying into. So it's really important that our agents look into those associations, engage us for help. Paul's going to talk a little bit why that's so important.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like you said, it is important to know what you're getting into when you're buying in these properties that have communities, whether it's a homeowners association or a condominium association, because a lot of them will have restrictions on what you can and cannot do with the property. And it doesn't just cover things like rentals. It could also be issues like pets, parking, visitors, things that could affect the value of your investment. So one important example that I give, because the main thing that people want to know, especially if your buyers are buying the property as an investment, is whether, what the rental restrictions are. Some buildings will have 0 short-term rentals allowed, less than 6 months. Some will have less than a year. It's not acceptable. Some will have restrictions that you can only rent more, once a year, whether it be for 6 months or 3 months. But you can only apply one time for a tenant and property. And an example of something that came up recently is they can amend these bylaws from time to time. So I have had a situation where an agent has done business in a community before and assured their buyer, yeah, this is a good community. You can rent it out in an area where there are a lot of buildings that have rental restrictions. So they advised their client, yeah, there's no problem here. You can rent it out. They went ahead and bought. Unbeknownst to them, there had been an amendment filed because if you have more than 2/3 of the owners approving it, an amendment can be filed with rental restrictions on the property. So in this case, an amendment had been passed that prohibited the rental of the units for the first year of ownership. So,
wow.
As an investor, you buy the property now, they close on the property, and then they went to the association and, to ask some questions and let them know. And they just mentioned, hey, we're going to have a renter coming in soon for an application. They said, well, you can't rent it the first year. So this was a significant investment for them, over $750,000. And now they're being told that they have to sit on it for a year because of this. And they had been told by the management company, they had been told by the agent, but there was a recorded updated covenant on the title, and they didn't have an attorney to review the exceptions to title. Because remember, we've talked about this before. There's the requirements to title, which is the issues that we have to clear up in order to be able to close and give our buyers clear title. Things like, open mortgages, judgments, liens, any affidavits that are required to clear title. Those are requirements. And then there's exceptions. The exceptions are the things that run with the land and continue to restrict what the owner can do with it. Things like easements to different utility companies, in this case, association documents, condominium documents, homeowners bylaws. Those things are not insured. So this person doesn't have a claim under title policy because it's not the title insurer's fault. This is something that's reported against the property, and they weren't aware. So that's why it's important when you're buying a property, whether it's as an investor or as a homeowner or a condo owner, to have somebody review. If you don't review it yourself and you want to hire us, we could do it, but make sure that you go through the association and all the amendments that have been filed to it. Because in this case, they were relying on the original condominium documents, which did allow it without knowing that there had been, this restriction passed last year. So that's one example. There's also a hot topic now is the short-term rentals, the Airbnb rentals. There are restrictions in some areas that are being passed by different municipalities prohibiting these type of rentals.
Makes sense. I mean, as a community owner,
You have people that are investing in properties specifically to turn. Yeah, and then it's even in areas that don't have HOAs. There could be government imposed. We haven't really seen that too much in Florida yet, but in other states, and it's probably coming because there's kind of a backlash right now towards the short-term vacation rental market. And it's getting a lot of the blame for the affordability crisis and the lack of inventory. So there are different municipalities that are passing restrictions. So say you're buying a property in an area, that the government, the local government has prohibited these short-term rentals and recorded a restriction. That's not going to come out on the title, on the requirements. So that's going to stay there. That's going to be there whether you buy it or not. So unless you know about it at the time of closing, you could buy, and then you could be in violation of that law, and you can't rent it, short term.
And you may not even know it. That's the scary part.
Yeah, so people don't know it. They don't bother to review the exceptions because they don't even know what that is, or they don't have an experienced attorney who looks at this stuff. And there are plenty of attorneys that don't look at it either. I've had that issue before too, where we see something and we ask the attorneys on the other side, and they had no idea. These things happen, so that's why it's important to work with with people that know what they're doing. Work with an attorney when you're doing purchase the biggest, most people the biggest investment they're ever going to make, and you want to know every detail and make sure there's no issues before you close, because after you close, you're limited on what you can do. You're not going to change the laws of the association or the municipality, so you have to either deal with it, take the loss for the year, or take the loss on not doing short-term rentals, or go ahead and sell it. In which case, you're going to probably, best case scenario, walk away even or close to even, but probably it's going to cost you some money.
Well, and not only that, I've heard nightmare stories about the power that these associations do have if they do put a lien in place, or they sometimes can override the mortgage lender, the property owner. It's like they have quite a bit of power, right?
Yeah, the associations do have the right to foreclose if they're not paid the maintenance. And then in this case, if you rented it out and you would be in breach of the covenants, I'm sure there's some kind of language in there where they would have the ability to fine, or for that rent amount, or it will just get into a complicated legal mess. But yeah, associations do have a lot of power in Florida. They can foreclose, and they don't wipe out the lender, but they wipe out your title. And I've seen that was a big issue during the mortgage crisis, where people were maybe paying the mortgage, but they stopped paying the association because money was tight, and they didn't realize the association foreclosed way faster than the bank. So yeah, you don't want to get into it with an association or come into it, without knowing exactly what it is that they can and can't do, and the restrictions on it, because in real estate the lessons are very expensive. The mistakes are very expensive, so that's something you definitely want to avoid.
So do your due diligence upfront, do your research, know exactly what you're getting into. It's not simply making a check every month to the association, but know what that covers, what the restrictions are, and make sure you have someone like Paul to review it. That's why we're here. If you have a client that's looking into a property, double check, make sure they know exactly what they're getting into, because that's a horrible experience.
Yeah,
and in
definitely.
this case, the client has a year that they can't rent the property thinking that they could. So definitely. Well,
that's a lot of money on the line. So it's better to spend a little bit more upfront and have that peace of mind, and potentially catch an issue. Hopefully we don't, everything's good. We say, yeah, everything looks in order here, you're good. And, they spend a few $100s rather than tens of thousands of dollars that they could cost them later on if, there's something unknown on the property.
Now, is this something that every time we do title here at Xcellence Title, we do a review of that, or is that a separate charge that we're going to have assessed to our buyer?
We do a review of the exceptions on the property. I always will look at that. If there's anything Usually they're pretty standard, but I don't know a lot of times if somebody's buying a condo, we're just doing title to make sure that it's marketable, clear title. But if they don't specifically ask me, hey, I'm buying this, I'm planning to rent it out, can you make sure that that's okay? Then I don't know to check that. I don't know if they're buying it as a primary, or they're going to live there, they're going to rent it, or what the intention is. So if you have a client who's not sure,
Mhm.
and a lot of times I get hired when we're not doing title. So a lot of times the seller controls who picks the title, who pays. They pay for title and they pick the agent. So you can't use Xcellence Title because they're using whoever the seller has. And then the buyer is kind of relying on them and may not know them, may not feel comfortable. So they will hire me and ask me, and then when I speak to them, I'll say, okay, what's your goal here? Is this a rental? Is this okay? And then I review everything and we'll let them know. That's the most common scenario now.
Well, either way, whether it's buyer or seller, I think that we need to know exactly what we're getting into when we're helping a client with a property. I think it's worth every moment, that you take a set aside and review everything, especially when the buyer's intention is to rent, or perhaps they have 3 vehicles they're going to park in that place. And that I've seen that too, where, they only allow so many parking spaces.
Yeah.
They can't have pets, and or like you said, things can change during the contract closing, that these things happen to change on that one buyer.
Yeah. And then once you do buy, you have to stay involved and up to date on what's going on, because things can change by majority vote or 2/3 vote. They can impose changes, so you have to be in kind of stay involved and vote and know kind of where they're going with it. But yeah, the parking thing is another good point, because a lot of them don't have recorded parking spaces, and it's kind of a ledger that's maintained by the association. So I always tell buyers, like, they might market it with 2 parking spots, but then you get there and, oh yeah, that one spot they were using because it was the other units, but it's not really theirs, and no, now a new owner can't use it. We've had that happen a few times. So it's important to go to the association directly and confirm with the parking situation when they're not deeded parking spaces. It's recorded in public record, which most of them are not. Just another fun issue that could come up.
Just another thing to be aware of. There's a lot of moving parts, and I think just don't go blindly into it. A lot of buyers just say, oh yeah, I've got approved, I'm in the community, but they don't look at all the little details that come with it, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Definitely heads up on restrictions. Please don't hesitate to engage us. As you can see, Paul has a lot of experience, different scenarios he has dealt with, whether your client is occupying the property or they're buying it as an investment property. Definitely, let's do our due diligence to make sure a smooth client experience. We are always here to help. Paul is here to help us at any time. You can call us, you can email us, support@excellencetitle.com. You can also call the agent support line, 305-595-7355, and it's going to be the option for title. We are here for you. And with that, Paul, I'd like to thank you for your time this morning and wish everybody a great rest of the week.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Happy to help.
Thanks so much, Paul. Take care. Bye.